The mountain never appears in the news footage, and that is exactly the problem for anyone trying to understand what happened along Iran's southern coast. Before getting into the strikes, the ships, or the headlines, it helps to break this down the way military planners actually think about it. In phases. Phase 1 is geography. Phase 2 is doctrine. Phase 3 is the attack itself. Phase 4 is what comes after, and that last phase is the one nobody can answer with certainty yet. Start with Phase 1, the map, because nothing else makes sense without it. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow passage of water that carries something close to 1/5 of the entire planet's oil and gas exports. Picture a hallway that roughly 1 in 5 barrels of energy traded worldwide has to pass through, with no other door available. That single geographic fact turns any military incident there into something far bigger than a regional skirmish. A missile fired in that strait does not stay a local story. It becomes higher prices at gas pumps thousands of miles away, nervous insurance underwriters, tanker captains rerouting at the last minute, and finance ministers holding closed-door calls they did not want to schedule. Anyone who has watched gas prices jump for reasons that seem to come out of nowhere has felt the tail end of exactly this kind of choke point anxiety, even without knowing the cause. Phase 2 is the part most casual coverage skips entirely. Why Iran built what it built in the first place. Decades ago, Iranian military planners faced a blunt strategic fact. There was no realistic way to build a navy that could go destroyer for destroyer, carrier group for carrier group, against the United States and expect to survive, let alone win. A head-on naval buildup would have been enormously expensive and would have ended the same way most head-on confrontations with a dominant navy end. Fast, humiliating, and final. So Iran chose a different formula. Instead of concentrating power into a handful of large, visible warships that could be found and sunk in an afternoon, it spread capability out. Fast attack boats, coastal anti-ship missiles, sea mines, drones, and, most importantly for this story, hardened underground shelters carved into the coastal mountains, tied to the Revolutionary Guard's naval forces, built to hide boats, missiles, and command infrastructure from exactly the kind of overwhelming air power the United States can bring to bear. Iranian state media and independent military analysts have described these facilities for years, presenting them openly as part of a southern coastal defense doctrine. The point was never secrecy for its own sake. The point was to make any American planner pause and wonder how much of that hidden capacity would still be standing after a single strike. That doctrine only works, though, because of the terrain Phase 2 depends on, which folds naturally into Phase 3. The coastline near the strait is a maze of islands, inlets, and broken shoreline, terrain that swallows small vessels and disguises launch points. If a defense strategy is built around dispersal and concealment, this coastline is close to ideal for it. It forces an opposing force to ask the same exhausting question after every single strike. What is actually destroyed and what is simply waiting quietly for the next opening? Phase 3 is where the shooting starts, and here the record is fairly specific. United States Central Command stated that American forces intercepted Iranian attacks, while Navy-guided missile destroyers were transiting the Strait of Hormuz. According to that statement, Iranian forces launched a combination of missiles, drones, and small boats at the destroyers named in the incident, without striking any American vessel. The United States responded with strikes against the Iranian military facilities blamed for the attack, including missile and drone launch sites, command and control locations, and intelligence and surveillance nodes. Notice the combination described in that one paragraph: missiles, drones, and small boats operating together, not separately. That layered mix is the signature of the exact asymmetric doctrine Phase 2 described. No single piece needed to win the engagement alone. The danger came from the pieces working in concert, each one designed to complicate the destroyer's response to the others. As the exchange widened, American strikes reportedly expanded further into command centers, air defense positions, missile and drone infrastructure, and coastal sites connected to threats around the strait, with targets reported near Bandar Abbas and on islands used for coastal defense. Iranian officials reported dozens killed and hundreds wounded across the strikes, and maritime tracking organizations documented repeated incidents affecting commercial shipping in the area, including confirmed attacks with sailor casualties. This was not a single pinpoint strike and a quiet aftermath. It was a broad campaign against the infrastructure that makes a hidden coastal navy function at all. Not just the boats, but the radar feeding them targets, the command posts directing them, the missile batteries covering their retreat. Which brings the story to Phase 4, the part with no clean resolution, because this is where public reporting quietly stops being able to answer the biggest question people actually want answered. Striking the entrance of a hardened facility built into rock is not necessarily the same as destroying what sits deeper inside it. Destroying nearby radar, storage, or launch points absolutely degrades a network's ability to function, slows its response time, and breaks its coordination. But it is not proof the buried system itself no longer exists, and that gap between damaged and destroyed is not an accident of reporting. It is the entire reason these shelters were built the way they were. Uncertainty was always part of the design. Force the stronger side to keep striking, keep guessing, keep wondering whether the next boat that appears is a leftover or a survivor. There's a broader argument sitting underneath all 4 phases, one worth turning over honestly. A distributed, hidden threat built into a coastline is a genuinely different kind of problem than the sort of target the United States military is built to dominate. America's strength has always been finding, isolating, and destroying large, identifiable military assets with overwhelming precision. A patient, dispersed, land-linked maritime threat resists that strength almost by design, because there is rarely one target whose destruction ends the story. That is not a weakness unique to any one country's military. It is closer to a permanent feature of asymmetric warfare, the same puzzle that has frustrated stronger militaries in different terrain across different decades. Whether you see that as an argument for even heavier strikes, or as proof that air power alone cannot fully close this kind of threat, is a genuinely open question, and reasonable people who have followed military history closely land on different sides of it. None of this stays abstract for long either. Ports in that region are not empty grids on a targeting map. Families live near them, workers commute past them every day. Once a strike campaign spreads along an inhabited coastline, the human toll rises alongside the strategic one, and the reported casualty numbers from these strikes are a reminder that every phase described above, geography, doctrine, engagement, aftermath, eventually intersects with ordinary people who never chose to live next to a military choke point. So where does that leave the actual question hanging over this entire operation? The public record supports repeated American strikes against Iranian coastal and maritime military targets tied to threats around the strait. It supports the presence of fast boats, missiles, drones, and hardened infrastructure operating as one integrated threat. It supports the existence of underground naval facilities built specifically to survive an opening strike. What it does not settle, and may not settle for a long time, is whether the deeper layer of that hidden system still exists, waiting for a quieter moment to reappear. A navy visibly bruised on the surface is not automatically a threat that has been removed at the root, and in a waterway that carries a fifth of the world's energy trade, that difference between reduced and removed is not a technicality. It is the whole ballgame. Maybe the more honest way to sit with this story isn't to ask who won, but to ask which is actually harder to kill. A fleet you can see, or an idea built from the start to survive losing one.